I think that we are just now starting to understand all of the ways and how it has permeated through every single facet of our society. It's anti-Blackness. It is the idea that anything a Black person has, I can have. Because what are they really, except for a commodity, a thing to have, to emulate, to take, to buy, and to sell in order to build my own wealth, right? So you can look at fashion, you can look at music, right? The idea that I couldn't go, to work, you or I couldn't go to work 20 years ago with our hair like this and be called professional,
right?
But Kim Kardashian or whoever can go on Vogue and have cornrows, right? Actual cornrows, and call them boxer braids and have it be a fashion coup.
By listening to my guests share how they are discovering their best self, you will discover the best part of you.
And welcome back to Discover Your Best Self podcast. Y'all, today I'm really excited because we are still in Women's History Month. Yes, it is still March. But I have with me one of my favorite cousins, Melanie Willingham Jaggers. The one thing about doing these podcasts that I can say is that I do get to interview who I want to interview. But not only that, she's out here making history. She is doing the damn thing. So she is actually the executive director at GLSEN, and she's going to explain to you more about what that program is. But we already had like a long conversation, just setting this interview up. And I'm super excited because she's so informative about a lot of the questions that we have just about the LGBTQ community and how she is just such a great, ambassador for that community, right? And so she also is the first Black woman non-binary leader, executive director that they've had there. So that's also breaking down some barriers, busting through these, what they call them, glass ceilings that we have. So no further ado, go ahead and please tell us, who you are and where you're from, because they don't know.
Got it. So I caught that you said one of your favorite cousins. That's a good move. That's a good move because we got lots of cousins.
It's a lot of us, y'all.
I'd be out here like, Nene said I was her favorite cousin, so get in line. So okay, I'll take top. You didn't even say top, whatever, but okay, I'll take it. Appreciate you. My name is Melanie Willingham Jaggers. I use they and she pronouns. Thank you so much for having me on Discover Your Best Self podcast. Long-time listener, first-time guest. So glad to be here. And to your question, GLSEN. So we've been around since 1990. We sit at the intersection of education, civil rights, and LGBTQ plus justice, right? Our work is to advocate for the safety and affirmation and full inclusion of K through 12, of young people in K through 12 schools, right? So LGBTQ plus kids in K through 12 education. GLSEN strives to build school communities where LGBTQ plus students and all students are safe and supported. Mm-hmm. When GLSEN was founded, it was founded by a group of teachers in 1990. Now, if you go back like in a time machine with me to the year 1990, a number of things were true then that are no longer true now. One thing that was true was that it was illegal to be gay in about half the country. There were laws on the books that you would get fined or jailed if you were thought to be a homosexual. 2, you could be fired as a result of being gay, like from your job. There was no legal protection, no legal recourse. And 3rd, it was a time in the world where bullying was considered a fact of life, right? So you shouldn't be gay. We found out you were gay, we're gonna ostracize you. And by the way, if you're a kid that anyone thinks is gay, we'll bully you, and maybe that'll help with the problem, right? With the problem. And so GLSEN came about at a time where teachers, there were gay teachers, gay people have always existed, right? There were gay teachers in these schools who it was not safe for them to be out themselves, right? And so they started seeing more and more young people come out in schools. And it was at that moment that there's a number of teachers. We have a kind of a sprawling creation story at GLSEN, but 2 key stories kind of come out from 2 of our founders. One person her name was Kathy. She was an athletic director at a private school outside of Boston. And she saw a young girl walking across the quad or whatever with like a jacket that had like a LGBTQ insignia on it. Sure. And she thought to herself, like, wow, I can't walk around like that. Like the least I can do as a gay person, as an adult, is help make this place safe and affirming for this kid to be exactly who they are brave enough to be. And then there was another part of our founding where there was a Kevin was his name. He was a history teacher, and a young person who wasn't gay, but who had two gay moms came up to him, and she was considering suicide. And she says, "I just can't take it anymore. Like the way that I'm talked about and bullied, the way my family is talked about and bullied, I really just can't take it." And he said, "Listen, you're straight, I'm gay. Let's form an alliance." Right.
Yeah.
And that's our story about how the first gay straight alliance was formed. There are many kind of origin stories around this.
Yeah.
And so all this to say that GLSEN came about at a time, right, where it was about making sure that kids who were being brave could be brave and could be safe, and that the adults were really, even beyond what they could do themselves, they were helping to make schools safe and affirming for those young kids. Now,
I was just going to ask real quick, because
yeah.
you're saying that with the schools. Now, what about parents within the school? Is there like parental classes or workshops?
No, so we really focus in the schools, right? So we have kind of 5 main areas, right? We work in what I call like upstream, and then we work at the end user, right, level, right? So upstream is like working with the Department of Education, working with state education associations, working with superintendents and at school districts to make sure that there are policies, right? That, hey, if something happens to you as a kid or your kid, right, you have recourse, right? If somebody pushes, my little cousin, your baby girl down, right? We want to be able to know we can roll up to the school and say what's going to be done about this, right? So there are policies that are needed on the books, particularly for, like, for example, if your kid got pushed down because and the kid who did the pushing was, saying something about her race or her gender, right? That's protected, right? You can't actually do that. You can't bully people on the basis of their race or gender. You shouldn't be able to bully kids on the basis of their LGBTQ plus identity, right? And so we work to make sure those kind of rules are on the books. You can't be bullying kids. You can't, punish them differently than you would punish a straight kid. You can't punish a trans kid differently than you would punish a non-trans kid. So we work upstream to make sure the rules are on the books, right? To make sure that these kids are able to go to school, a place that we require them to be. Like, you get in trouble, they get in trouble if they're not there. Let's make sure that it's safe when they are there.
So
And then
rules, are they written into law, or how do you all work with government agencies as well to be able to, because I mean, essentially school is, if it's a public school, right, which most of the ones that you all work with are state or government funded, state or local, or sorry, public schools.
Yeah, so we work with all schools, and what we do is we work to put the rules on the books that impact all schools. If you're going to be a school in this country, you need to follow these rules. Now, there are some private schools and some parochial and religious schools that opt out because they don't take public funding. But if you take public funding, so you're a public school or a charter school, then you need to follow these rules, right, of non-discrimination. We're not asking for special.
Same as like suburban schools where it's more taxpayers in that neighborhood. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
All schools are funded through property taxes, right? Which is why in poor communities you have poor schools, because the property is not valued very high, and in rich, wealthy, affluent areas you have rich, wealthy, affluent schools, right? It's the unfairness, right, of the schools matching the property value of the community. So that's the upstream stuff, right? We work to get the rules on the books, and then we work at the end user level, where the young people are the end users of education, right? We work to make sure that classrooms and hallways and bathrooms and sports teams and communities are all safe for young people to participate in, right? This is not about, again, it's not about special treatment. It's like, can a 5-year-old go to school and be themselves and not be bullied or harassed or told that they are bad or wrong, please? And that's what we're fighting to do, right? So we work to make the rules, right? But we also work with the teachers, administrators, lunch ladies, bus drivers, right? We want everybody that's involved in the school community, everyone who is working with with every young person in K-12 schools, to be on our side to just ensure the dignity and safety and affirmation that these young people can get that when they're in school. So we've discovered that we've been around since 1990. We've been doing research since 1999. So I was still in high school. You were in high school in 1999, right? So this is like the largest. What was that?
Not going into high school.
Okay, all right, little cousin. Okay, I was a junior.
Okay.
Um, but we've been doing research since 1999, and it's first-person research, right? So it's self-reported data from kids who identify as gay, or lesbian, or bisexual, or transgender, or queer, and they report, like, about harassment, about isolation, about seeing themselves or their communities reflected in the curriculum, et cetera. So we've been asking these same questions for about 22 years, 21 years at this point, and what we found that there are 4 core supports, right? These supports work for every single young person in school. Every single young person, regardless of who they are, who we think they are, need these 4 things, right? That's supportive educators. We know that 1 is great. We know that 6 is the tipping point. If you've got 6 supportive educators, you Gucci. You're gonna be better off than if you didn't have supportive educators. You need inclusive curriculum that reflects your life, your family, your community, and also gives you a window into the lives of others, right? The people who you don't know about, into their lives and communities and families. There's also, supportive policies. So like if something bad happens to you, right? Or if you got to go to the bathroom, there's a place for you to go. It's like really just about inclusion.
Mhm.
And then the 4th, I always mess up. So there's teachers, there's curriculum, there's policies. Oh man, I forgot. I will come back to it. Okay, it's been a long day.
I
It's
have
been
a
a long day.
question though for you.
Yeah.
I kind of want to get into some of the details of, just learning about, you know, LGBTQ community, especially if I'm a first year teacher
Mhm.
and, this is new for me. So just experiencing that journey with my students or even with my coworkers, whoever that may be, is I feel like a different experience because if I don't identify, I guess, with one of them, and then if I haven't been exposed or my family, talks badly about whatever, it's just like race, right? And
Yeah.
so you're being met with all of these different biases. And in doing that, it's hard to work in that atmosphere when you have to be supportive, right, of these students. So not only, are students who are in that category, but then they also may be a minority, right? So now they're double minorities,
Yeah.
Hispanic or Asian or Black, you're a Black woman. And so how does that differentiate from other people who may be white or Caucasian and they're dealing with this?
Mhm.
Does it differ?
Yeah. Well, listen, L- people who are in the LGBT community, right? Gay folks, queer people, we are part of. So, like you and I, we're Black Americans, right? We can
Right.
go a lot of places in the world and see Black people there, right? Same with a lot of different folks, right, around the world. The thing is that there are gay people in every community, in every country, in every language group, right, in every ability, and every gender, right? Gay people are everywhere, queer people are everywhere. So that's part 1. Part 2 is that because of that, we know that nobody is just gay. The job of an educator is to support students, right? So I don't have to be the same religion as you to teach, you. If I'm a teacher, I don't have to have a kid in order to teach a kid. If I'm an educator, you don't have to be gay to support a young person. What does a young person need? They need
Right.
supportive educators, supportive policies, inclusive curriculum, etc. Oh, I know what the 4th one is. It's supportive peer environments, like a
Yeah.
GSA or a BSU or some other kind of student club that's peer led, where they can go get support from their peers. What queer kids need is what all kids need. And so the thing that I think that we kind of get it, we can sometimes tie ourselves up in knots about, it's like, well, how do I support this particular kind of kid? Well, how do you support a kid? And how do you not discriminate against them because of who they are or where they come from?
Mhm.
That's the question. This is
Right.
not about above and beyond. This is about how do you not harm a kid? And like, if you don't know how, come to GLSEN. We've got resources that are age appropriate for every grade, K to 12. If you want to figure out how to tell stories that are beyond just like mommy and daddy and baby, right? Like, if you want to figure out how, stories with diverse characters, diverse family structures, people of diverse identities and gender identities, you can come to us. We have a rainbow library that has age appropriate, grade appropriate books, K to 12, that show there's at least one book in every box that's in Spanish, but there are diverse, racially diverse, gender diverse, geography, family makeup. Diversity is represented in all the books. So there are ways right? But this is really about, I want to kind of I want to encourage and help folks to kind of change their minds a little bit. This is not about doing everything right,
Right.
around like, how do you, say the right thing, et cetera. It's like, no, how do you not, it's much easier to not discriminate, right, against a child. And that's what this whole thing is about. It's about, what do we owe our kids? We owe them safety at school. We owe them an education,
Mm-hmm.
because frankly, if we keep pushing out young people, pushing them out of our education system, right, we know they're going to be less likely to have a good life, right? We're really foreclosing on their possibilities for a fulfilling life that has dignity and opportunity, et cetera, right? We push kids out into jails. We push kids out into unsafe social environments. Let's not do that, right? Let's make schools a place where every kid can succeed. That's the whole point.
Right. And I guess my question too was, because you are the first, woman of color in your position, but you're also representing an
Mhm.
organization that's supposed to be inclusive, how is that so? Like, as far
I
as,
missed your question. You broke up there for a
oh,
second.
I'm sorry. I said, so because you're the first woman of color, in your position, and the reason for
Mhm.
me asking about, yeah, you're in this category, but now you're also in this category. Um, how is that so that you're in this position, but it's not necessarily diverse?
Well, listen, I walk through the body in the body I came to Earth with, right? Like, I
Right.
didn't have a choice about this body, and I walk through this world, clear about who I am, right? I know who I am, and the world also tells me who I am, right? So I've also had my own professional experiences, right? I've been an organizer. I've worked in organizational development, right? Leading organizational change. I'm a community organizer, right? I've done all kinds of things. I'm an educator. I'm an applied theater artist, right? I have a lot of experience. It's my experiences, right? My lived experiences, my work experience that make me qualify for this job.
Yeah.
It's the body I walk through the world in that gives me a perspective that
Mm,
is one that is unique to any leader who has ever led this organization before. And frankly, it's like, we don't use the word minority that much anymore, right? Because it's like actually not true. This country is majority minority, right? Which is a
right.
impossible thing to be, right? There are more people of color in this country than there are non-people of color. And so my life has absolutely been shaped by what it means to be Black in this country, what it means to be socialized as a girl and as a woman in this country. I identify as non-binary, right? I walk through the world as a queer person. That has all shaped my understanding of the world.
Mm,
And I'm also a professional, right? That's been working since I was 17 years old. So there's a way in which I bring, as everyone does, the breadth and depth and texture of their experiences to the work. And that is what it is. Now, GLSEN is lucky to have its first non-white leader, because there are a lot of non-white people in this community, and for so long, our movement has been disserved. Our country has been disserved by white people being kind of elevated into leadership disproportionately, right? Let's have leadership across all organizations, across all parts of our government, reflective of the people who live in this country.
mhm.
And for a long time, people of color have been locked out.
Yeah, for sure. And, what are, just from your experience, what are ways in which, because we are still in Women's History Month, um, as far as women being able to progress in their professional careers, and especially when they're in careers or they're in organizations where there isn't, any leadership of color?
You said, so you broke up a little bit. Like, what's my advice?
Yes, as far as, people just being, or either women or just people of color being able to, progress
Mhm,
in leadership and, these
mhm,
larger organizations into an executive role, director role, not just managerial,
mhm.
but being able to
Yeah.
actually lead programs and
Mhm.
groups.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, so I've held a whole bunch of positions. I've been like at the entry level, I've been a coordinator. I was when I first moved to New York City back in 2009, I like fought to get this job that paid me nothing. I remember getting a paycheck that was just like, oh wow, I worked for 2 weeks for this. Like this is nothing. I got paid like $34,000 a year at, coming, entry level. And it's just like, that was not a whole lot of money to have to live in New York City on, even in 2009. And now I'm the executive director of a national nonprofit, right? So I've literally sat at every seat kind of along the ladder, going up the ladder to where I am now. And here's what I would say, and I've often been, and this is in school, this is in different, this is definitely throughout school, but then also in other working environments. I've often been when I've come in, I've been the only, right? The only one like me, whether that's Black or queer or woman, et cetera. And, my job when I leave is to make sure there's not a person I'm leaving behind that will be the only when I go, right? How am I bringing in more people who are like me, who are different than me, right? So we are building out the diversity, right? The actual beautiful differences where talent lives, right? I forget who says it. Maybe it was like Obama that says, talent is evenly distributed across our society, across people, right? It's like people are the talent, the brilliance, the beauty is evenly distributed, but opportunity isn't, right? And so my job, if I'm the only one or if I'm the first one, it's to open the door, but then it's to prop it open to make sure that other folks are able to come in through that door, or let's maybe take out the wall, take out the door altogether and invite folks in. So for me, my job at whatever level I was at was always to bring more of people like me, or people who were not represented fully in the organization, because you don't know what you don't know, right? If you're not at you don't know who's missing. You don't know what's missing from the conversation until you understand who's missing from the conversation, right? Whoever's not there is not bringing the brilliance that they have with them. And it's so important for us to be better, for us to be stronger, for us to be smarter, more strategic. I work in nonprofits, right? So I'm not worried about profitability, but like you're not touching the markets you could be touching if you're missing a whole person who represents diverse market segments if they're not at the table. Mm-hmm. So this is really about, for me, my advice is to make sure that if you're the only, or if you're the first, make sure you're not the last, and make sure that you're not leaving somebody else as the only when you leave. Mm-hmm. And then I would also say, like, find your people. Yeah. Find your people, because part of this work is, and I'm curious, I don't know, kind of what your experience is, but, part of my experience is like coming in and feeling different, and I was, young for a really long time. I'm turning 40 in a couple of weeks, so I feel like less young every day. But, to be young in a workplace, right? I remember when people were like constantly worried about millennials coming into the workforce. It's like
it was worried about millennials. We're going to get older.
Years. Right. It's like, why are you scared? So, I call myself Lucy, the first millennial. Like I was born in 1982. That's like uncovered in the Horn of Africa, like the first millennial ever. So, I was a young person in the workforce, and people were constantly talking about what young people weren't doing. And it's just like, it is exhausting to constantly have to explain yourself, right? So if that's your calling, if what you're doing is pushing and breaking open doors, climbing a ladder, breaking a glass ceiling, etc., make sure you have your people to keep you grounded. So go to have a person, have a squad, have a community, have a circle where you don't have to explain yourself, where your people get you, because it's so important for us to regenerate in order for us to be our fullest self, our best self. We deserve respite. We deserve understanding, right? We deserve for people to know where we're coming from, even if that's not where we work all the time, right? So that's what I would say. That's my advice.
So, question about, the education that you all give when you're in these schools and, organizations with students. Why is it important for people to understand what people's sexual preference is, or what that means? Because on the spectrum, there's a lot of different, preferences or whatnot. And what's the difference between who you are and who you have sex with? Like, what does that mean? Because I think there's a lot of differences, and I feel like a lot of people don't understand, and then we're just ignorant, right? And then when you're ignorant, then you become insensitive.
Sure. Yeah, totally. That's a great question. So So before I answer that question, I just want to appreciate that you and I have known each other since you were born, right? We are actually blood relatives. And so I just appreciate how you and I over time have had conversations that are really heartfelt, where you don't have to, like, it's okay to not know something, right? When you are in a loving, trusted relationship with someone else. And so I'm gonna tell you the answer to your question, but what I'm also say to your listeners is be in community with people, right? Don't find no, like, random queer or trans person, ask them inappropriate questions. Get you a cousin, right? Get you a, like, who is a gay person that you're related to? There is one. You are definitely related to a gay person. Go talk to them, right? And I hope you're in a good relationship with them, because you should be able to ask questions that are smart or dumb or whatever, anywhere in between. So the thing I would just start off by saying is that be in relationship with folks, right? It's like if you're a well-meaning white person that wants to really learn like how to be woke, it's like, go, who is your actual friend, right? Who is your actual Black friend? Not the pretend one that you tell people you have. Who's your actual Black friend?
Yeah.
And then how can you have real talk with them? And if you can't have real talk with them, they're not your friend, right?
Yeah.
If they're not, and my rule of thumb is if a Black person is not going to talk a little bit of shit about a white person, how white people get on their nerves, or how racism gets on their nerves, they're not your actual friends, right?
Yeah.
That's your coworker, that's your neighbor, that's the person you see frequently, that's not your friend. So, so to your question about the differences, right? So there is, and you know what? I heard Caitlyn Jenner say this once, and I'm not a fan. I don't like Caitlyn Jenner for lots of reasons. None of those reasons are because she's transgender. I respect her gender identity. I think her politics are terrible. I think that she's she has done some real harm in terms of her politics. But Caitlyn Jenner said, gender is who you go to bed as. Sexual orientation is who you go to bed with. Okay. So me as Melanie, I go to bed, right? I am married to a woman, right? So that's my sexual orientation. I go to bed as a non-binary queer person, right? So gender identity is about kind of how you walk through the world, how you understand yourself. A lot of people have a gender identity that is male. A lot of people have a gender identity that's female. Some people have gender identities that are not that, right? That's maybe somewhere in the middle between the two kind of binary choices, male, female. Some people are agender, like.
Does that mean like it's unidentifiable? Does that what that mean? Or kind
yeah, I mean, so gender is interesting because over time in different societies, gender has been defined differently, right? So so an easy example is like in some cultures, men in other times wore what we would call dresses or skirts, right? Tunics, right? Like shirt dress, right? And in some cultures across time, women wore pants, and in others, women didn't wear pants. Because if you're a woman that wore pants, you weren't a woman, right? Like there's a way in which you perform your gender, and that's based in society, right?
Yeah.
Right. And so people can be one or the other, or neither, or both, right? That's one way of thinking about it. Sex, right, which is like your genitalia, what's between your legs, right? A baby comes out of their mother's body, and the doctor looks at the child and says, based on their genitalia, oh, you're a boy. Oh, you're a girl, right? In our culture, in our society right now, right, what we've done is make penis the same thing as man or male, right? And it's not necessarily that. We've made vagina the same thing as female or girl, woman.
But does
That's
that
not
change
necessarily
in like medical, but from a medical standpoint, do you still have to have those differences?
So what we're talking about now is sex, right?
Okay.
Sex and gender are different things, right? Sex is related to your chromosomes. It's related to what the doctor, pointed to between your legs and said, oh, that's a that. That means you're a this, right? That's sex. Gender is how you walk through the world. Right. It has actually nothing to do, like your vagina or your penis is not a personality type. Like, that doesn't define who you are, right? And so there are people who were assigned female at birth, like me, right? Who walk through this world as non-binary. It was like, for me, gender is a thing I don't feel closely related to. I don't feel like I don't find myself reflected in the description of me necessarily as a woman. I identify as a Black woman because that's my political identity. That's kind of where I come from. It's the people who I look to for my political North Star. It's the people who I love, right? It's the folks who raised me, right? We were raised in a matriarchal family. I identify as a Black woman, but outside of my Blackness, do I identify as a woman? Not particularly, right? So that's my kind of that's how I land at the idea of non-binary. Other people land at that idea, understanding of themselves as non-binary for different reasons, right? So there's no universal around like how you end up there, but for me, that's what that is. So I identify as a Black woman and as a non-binary person, for me. So, but the idea of gender is about how you walk through the world, how you understand yourself, right? What you are assigned at birth by a doctor who doesn't know you, right? It's like, that's one thing. That's what you have. That's where that's how your body is. How your body is not necessarily your same as your gender, right? So that's the thing. In this culture, we have conflated your sexual organs with your gender. And there's not the same. Those are two different choices. Lots of people are assigned a sex at birth and then identify with that gender, that same gender, throughout their life, right? Someone assigned male at birth identifies as a boy. Okay, look at that. That was the doctor guessed right, right? But like gender is formed over time. It's how you understand yourself. It's how you see yourself in the world. Sometimes people are assigned female at birth, and actually that's not the same. They don't grow up to be a woman or a girl, but they grow up to understand themselves as non-binary. They grow up to understand themselves as a man, right? This is about how you show up in society, how you what are the roles, et cetera. That's the thing about gender that's different than sex.
So I have two questions. I'll start with the first one, which is, especially dealing with like teenagers, right? Hormones and different things, and they're feeling different ways. I've heard moms, right? Or friends of moms, and they say, well, my daughter or son now feels like that they are something different, right? So my son feels like, he's a girl. And so they want to change, or maybe they want to start taking hormone pills. I don't know. But then they change their mind again. So is it just like choices, or is it a feeling? What are these differences, and how do you and then coping with that, right, within school? Because now this teacher or whoever the administrators are, they're like, well, Sam now wants to be Samantha, and now she doesn't want to be Samantha, and now she's back Sam. Like what is that, and how do you deal with those different things? You just go with it, or how do you know when someone is serious?
Yeah. So a couple things. I'm not sure if you are aware of, but I don't know the stories of a kid who says, I'm this day, and then never mind, and then I'm this the other day, right? It's just like, so I'll use you as an example. You are the girliest child I had ever met. And I'm only a couple years older than you. I was like, wow, like she's a for real girl. Like there was like no convincing you that you weren't a girl, right? That you didn't need the frilliest, that you didn't need the floweriest, that you didn't need the prettiest or pinkest thing, okay? Now, imagine that the world was telling you, but that's wrong because you're a boy. So there's a part of it that's like, how would you have felt if you were a kid? If you were to go to your daughter, right, and say, okay, you're, I know we've been pretending that you've been a girl this whole time, but really you're a boy, and suddenly her whole life changed, and she was now kind of living this.
And she's just like me.
It'd be hard.
Yeah,
child, I know, right? So it'd be hard, right? They'd be sad. They are not confused. They're not confused, right? This is not about, oh, you say you're a girl, let me go give you some hormone pills to make you a girl. None of this, that's not what this is about. This is about kids as early as there's a if you think back to your own, it's called gender identity, it's called identity formation. And it happens around race, it happens around gender, it happens around all kinds of things, that age appropriate kind of like, parts of your life. Kids begin understanding themselves and their gender like 3 years old, right? Like, this is no, like, oh, I woke up today, I'm a dinosaur, give me some dinosaur pills. It's like, no, these kids know who they are and who they aren't. That's part one. Part two is that, this whole idea about like what it means to give a kid appropriate trans affirm or gender affirming healthcare is like not understood, right? It's not like I wake up today, I'm a dinosaur. I wake up today, I'm a boy, give me boy pills. It's like, that's not what happens at all, right? This is about conversations that happen between the child and their parent who knows them best. It's about conversations that eventually happen between the child, the parent, and a doctor who's an actual expert. It's about conversations that happen with the child, their parent, of like a mental health professional that literally they're experts. No one has an agenda to make a kid transgender. This is really about how much are we going to listen to or not listen to a child when they tell you what's going on with them. And again, just like being an educator, our job is to educate and support kids, right? It's not to turn them into one thing or another. This is why educators
from that, or like what's some of the feedback that you've gotten? You've had to like go in and say, listen, this is what we do. I mean, well, I know you already say this is what we do, but I guess reinforcing those things with supportive material or something.
Yeah, I mean, you know, sadly, this happens all the time, right? In the survey that we do, over time, right, we've seen that, you know, verbal harassment and like violent assault has gone down over time, but it's still way high, right? And it's highest for kids who are transgender and non-binary. We've done this research over time. We found that like verbal harassment and bullying has gone down, but it's still really high, right? And it's highest for kids who are trans and non-binary, perceived as gay. And it's highest, right? Highest physical and verbal abuse, harassment, assault are highest for kids who are seen as gay or understood as transgender and who are kids of color, right? So it's the Black, it's the brown, it's the indigenous kids, right? It's the kids who are understood as immigrant, who come from immigrant communities. It's those kids who face the most harassment, assault, etc., are targeted the most for their real or perceived sexuality, right, or gender identity.
Yeah.
So that's the trouble, right? The trouble is that it's because no kid is just gay, right? These kids are gay and Black or brown, right, or immigrant or have disabilities or whatever. And so when you get into the place of discrimination, it's often discrimination layered on top of each other, right? It's not just one, right? This is not this is a buffet. It's not just like you order one and you get the one thing.
Right.
And so again, it's like part of what we do at GLSEN is focus on LGBTQ plus kids, absolutely. But we also have a focus on racial justice, gender justice, and disability justice in schools, because we know we can't protect and defend queer kids unless we're also dealing with the interlocking systems that are also impacting them negatively.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot. But okay, there's been in the news, right? And I just wanted to get your feedback on this, transgender woman who, won, I think it was swimming, right? And so, people are protesting, they're upset. Is it fair for someone who who was a man, has a man physique, probably is faster, naturally a male body is faster than a female body. And so now that they're a trans woman, how in the future does this look, as far as like competing, athletics, even in schools and all those things, is that fair?
Yeah. I'm really glad you asked the question, because this is an important conversation for us to have, because we got to get this right. We have to get this issue right across our community, right? Across our Black community, across folks who identify and are perceived as women, right? The idea that you can be a feminist, and we have to make sure that when you call yourself a feminist, you are also standing in solidarity with trans women, right? It can't just be cisgender people against trans girls. It's like, no, we all, like, if we're going to call ourselves feminists, then we have to include and advocate for the inclusion and dignity for all women. So I'm super glad you asked this question. So here's the thing. So about 200 years ago, a person came to a meeting, Sojourner Truth, came to a meeting of women who were advocating for the right to vote, right, the suffragettes. She came to this meeting, and she said to them, "Ain't I a woman?" Right? She said that to them because they were women fighting for the rights of women, but leaving out her.
Black
And
women.
so she said, but ain't I a woman?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, these are white women excluding Black women, right? Because to them, to white women, Black women weren't real women. They weren't real women. Black women weren't real women to these suffragettes. Now, why? Oh, that was based on science too, because Black people weren't actually human. That was based on religion. That was based on belief and on culture. And Sojourner Truth asked them, and to me, it's her question that rings in my ear now when we talk about trans women and girls. Ain't I a woman?
Mm-hmm.
So 200 years ago, neither you or me would be considered a woman, right? So let's just hold that for a second. Now, I also come to this conversation with the fundamental belief that trans women are women and trans men are men, right? Like I understand how gender and sex are different and how gender, right, being a woman, gender identity, I believed you when you were a kid and you said you were like, wouldn't let the world forget that you were a girl, right? I believe another person when they tell me they're a girl, if that's what they truly believe. That's how they're moving through the world. So that's the other thing I kind of come into this conversation with. So I think about Sojourner Truth and I believe people when they tell me, right, they are, just like I believed you at 3, right? I believe women when they tell me that they're women. So with those two things said, you know, what we're facing right now, what we're kind of why this is an issue right now is because the conservative right is trying to figure out a way, and people who are anti-gay actually are trying to figure out a way to marginalize, target, erase, and attack gay people. But you can no longer say, like I said, you know, back when we first started talking in 1990, it was illegal to be gay in half the country, right? It's these same people who now can't you know say gay people are bad and like be taken seriously. Now they're just going after trans people because they're the most marginalized in our LGBTQ community, and they're going after kids because these kids are the most vulnerable part of our community. Okay, so that's another piece of it that's I think important for us to understand. Now to your question, right, around sports. Here's the thing: the Olympic Commission, the NCAA have had rules on the books regulating how trans athletes can play, trans girls and trans boys can play sports in a way that is fair to everyone who's competing. And these are like elite, you know, athletes at the Olympic level and at the NCAA level. They've had rules on the books since the 90s. So why are we just hearing about it now? Right? We're hearing about it now because folks are trying to make it a culture war issue, not because it's a thing that like you have to, you know, like ward off against in terms of like trans girls are going to win everything. Trans girls have been playing for 20 years next to cis girls, and they've been and the world hasn't turned upside down. That's number one. Number two, so when I'm talking about like the rules and regulations, that's about hormones. It's about hormone blockers. It's about how long you have to be on, you know, hormone replacement therapy treatment
So they do
to make sure that you're
in place.
Yeah, those rules have been in place for 20 years.
Okay. So why I don't understand.
They've been in place for 20 years.
I know why, because we live in a, you know, a sensational media driven world, but you know, we're not going to tell the whole story.
Right.
So instead of saying that we have these rules set up, this has been going on for the past 20 years, no, they'll just highlight.
Yeah, trans girls are, because here's the other thing is that trans people are being more accepted. They're more widely accepted in society. Right. So now there's more visible, trans people are more visible, right? But their agenda for like shaming gay people back into the closet hasn't worked, and it hasn't worked so well that now trans folks are coming out, right? And they are a part of society. They are loved. They are beautiful. They're being celebrated, right? They're no longer in the shadows, and we can't make the argument to keep them in the shadows. But it's the people who want them in the shadows, who don't want them to exist, that are making this argument. Now, that's not what everyone who like, oh, well, maybe a boy shouldn't compete against a girl, right? It's not everyone doesn't think that, but the people behind this messaging, that's what they think. That's the agenda that they're looking to put forward. Okay, so now back to your question about sports, which is, you know, the other thing I would say is that GLSEN is a K-12 focused organization, right? It's like, you know, 5 to 18 years old. The purpose of sports in K through 12 is community, it's leadership, It's physiological, it's psychological development, it's teamwork, it's belonging, right? That's the point of
Right.
sports when you're in K-12. Now, like, you could be like me and really love basketball, but not be very good at it, right? It's like, I never won nothing in basketball, but I went out and I ran,
But
I
I like
played, I
I
shot the
did
ball,
I
I
did
played defense.
suicides.
I was exactly. I did suicides. I did laps. I was not very good, right? So like the point of sports in K-12 education is the social component of it. You are not there. Nobody's a professional in fifth grade, right? What is it like? So the whole idea that it's not fair for trans kids to play. Well, trans kids are kids, and what we know is that sports are good for kids. So if kids want to play, let kids play,
And I
right?
don't even
And
know
then when you
if
get to
that's
the
necessarily like the
NCAA,
not play, because my question isn't necessarily can they not play, but I understand where people are like, no, don't let, because they're just hateful,
yeah.
right? And so, but really,
Well, but what happened with this with
yeah,
sorry, go ahead.
yeah. But with the Olympics, right, when
What
it's
happened?
focused on gender, because like men's swimming, women's swimming, like how does that work? And
Yeah.
so I totally understand your answer, but when they're kids, a lot of stuff is co-ed, or unless you get into some of the other,
Yeah.
really
I played on
small.
I played on a girls basketball team. So many sports are gendered. I
Yeah.
played on a girls basketball team from third grade, through high school. Never any good on any of the teams. I was probably the best on some of the teams, but I still wasn't very good.
Hmm.
But those are gendered team sports, right? And so if you're trans and you're a trans girl and you want to play on a girls basketball team, come on.
Hmm.
Like, you know what I mean? Because it's about play, it's about leadership, it's about teamwork, it's about belonging, right? And so really what happens when you don't let trans kids play is that they don't get a chance to feel like they belong. They don't get a chance
Right.
to be on a team with people who are like them.
Right.
Like girls want to hang out with girls most of the time, right? It's just like that to me, when we say it like that, when we think about it like that, to me it uncovers the cruelty of what it means to try to keep excluding trans people
Mhm.
from every part of daily life that they can figure out how to. Now, your question was about the NCAA young woman that just won the swimming championship.
Mhm.
Now, I'm going to go back a couple years to there was a track meet. There were two trans girls who won the state championship in like track, a couple of different events in Connecticut, and that's what really kind of blew up this trans athletes issue. These two trans girls. Now, these two trans girls were Black, and they beat a couple of girls who were white. How about that's the issue? If
Mhm.
you or I had run that race,
Mhm.
right, and we had beat them, right, it is not uncommon for the gender of any winner, particularly a winner of color, to be called into question. Are they really a woman?
Mhm.
Right? Go back to Sojourner Truth. Ain't I a woman? Right? It literally is that. It's about people of color, women of color being seen as less feminine, less womanly, less legitimate. So then you add sexual orientation, gender identity on top of that, right? So these are trans girls. Well, then they're really not women, right?
Right.
It's like it's disgusting.
Yeah.
It's disgusting. So all this to say, I appreciate the question. I think these are important conversations for us to have, and these are not short conversations, right? These are conversations that have so many layers to them,
Right.
but they tweet really easily. They make a good headline, right? It's a good. I was texting with people yesterday about this World Star Hip Hop um, uh, article about the trans woman that won the NCAA swimming championship. It's just like, yeah, we have to actually have longer conversations we turn the heat down, we lean into our relationships, and we talk about I know and love trans people, trans men and trans women. You're not going to ever hear me say that they don't deserve access to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that they don't deserve dignity, that they don't deserve housing, right? Or love and relationships or employment. And right now, employment, housing, all kinds of stuff that was illegal. Like it was legal to discriminate against gay people back in the day. It's still legal to discriminate against trans people those same ways today. We've
Mhm.
got to end it. We've got to end it.
Right. So this is my last detailed question,
Yes.
and then I have another question after that. That's the real last one.
Okay.
But so and this is just me because I'm always so curious, and we've had this conversation as to, why, especially with gay men, no matter the ethnicity, why does it seem like they have a Black woman personality? It's just, I love this question because I feel like, everyone wants to belong somewhere, right? We've been having this conversation of where do people belong? People are trying to find themselves, discover their best self. But why is it a Black woman that they want to be? I know we're fly. I know
the flyest.
We are. We're the
flyest.
flyest.
You see me? You see me right now? Like,
we got on the same outfit and we didn't plan this. So,
that's grandma working.
and we just, I know we are contagious, we're lively, very animated, but what is that? It's just so crazy to me that it's like it's the same personality or something.
Yeah, it's racism. I mean, that's the short version. I'll give you a longer version. It's racism, right? It's the idea that that Black women particularly are here to make you laugh, to care for you, to be your shoulder, like to literally be your slave, to care for you, to be your custodian, to be your maid, to be your mammy, right? That's part one. And then part two, so that's like the anti-Blackness. The other part of the anti-Blackness is about having access to any part of us or our culture or our experience or our mannerisms or our language that they want to. And they can be anyone, right? I think that, the way that anti-Blackness is foundational to this country, I think that we are just now starting to understand all of the ways and how it has permeated through every single facet of our society. It's anti-Blackness. It is the idea that anything a Black person has, I can have. Because what are they really, except for a commodity, a thing to have, to emulate, to take, to buy and to sell in order to build my own wealth, right? So you can look at fashion, you can look at music, right? The idea that I couldn't go, to work, you or I couldn't go to work 20 years ago with our hair like this and be called professional.
Right.
But, Kim Kardashian or whoever can go on Vogue and have cornrows, right? Actual cornrows, and call them boxer braids and have it be a fashion coup.
What was
right?
it?
It's this
Bo Derek. I was like, who the hell is that? I didn't even understand.
Bo Derek. Bo Derek braids. Yeah.
I was like,
a
those
white girl
are African poetic justice braids. Like
exactly, box braids. Janet Jackson, poetic justice. Exactly. So it's like it's about Black people being and everything we are and anything we've had being up for grabs, being anyone can have it, including us, right? So whoever that one Black woman is that everyone thinks that they are imitating, that lives inside of them, right? It's just like it's a caricature of who Black women are, and Black women are fly, amazing, like you want to be us, but we're also complex. We also have feelings. We're also full people. And no one turns into a Black woman when they get pulled over by the police. No one turns into a Black woman when you're interviewing for a job. No one turns into a Black woman who's not a Black woman, right? When you're doing something that is serious, that is real life stuff, you turn into a Black woman when you're drunk, when you're trying to be sassy or funny. It's like, the way that we are treated is a reflection of the anti-Blackness that is all around us in every community, including the LGBTQ plus community, which is why it's so important, right, for people who walk around in bodies like mine to lead these organizations, right? Because if we're talking about justice, if we're talking about inclusion, if we're talking about everybody, well, then let's make sure the people who are helping to lead that movement have an understanding of what it is to walk through this world on one of the toughest roads that there are in this country. Not the only tough road, but a real tough road, right? So I'm so happy to see and have colleagues in this movement, in this field, leading other national LGBTQ plus organizations who are Black, who are women, who are Black men, right? Who are Latino, Latinx, who are leading these organizations that were previously led by white folks. Because it's just, again, I said this earlier, you get a different perspective, and that perspective is useful in a world where people from these perspectives have had a really hard time, right? So if you've had a really hard time and you've navigated it and you have these professional skills to lead and guide an organization or a program, et cetera, it's like we have more voices and perspectives at a table when what we're doing is fighting for justice, and our justice is going to include everybody. That's the thing. Whenever we're fighting for inclusion, that inclusion has to be everybody. It can't just be me and you. That's not inclusion. That's a club, right? That's like our family reunion. That's what that is. That's not inclusion. That's not justice, right? Justice actually, when we say all, we mean all, you know, and that's what it has to be.
Awesome. So my last question
Mm-hmm.
is, what does it mean to discover your best self?
Great question. So I'm gonna tell you a story about my coming out, when I think it answers your question. So for me, you know, the hardest part of coming out was coming out to myself. It was like, I really gave being straight the old college try. I promise you. I mean, you probably I think you met a raggedy boyfriend or two. Like there was, I really did give this whole straight thing the real college try. I promise. I left no stone unturned. And it was the moment when I said to myself, okay, like, I'm not really happy. And I think I'm different in this way that I've always been afraid of being different in. Now, what if I just like turned toward that part of myself and I said, like, Melanie, I love you. I don't know who you are. I don't know who that part of me that I don't know yet. I don't know who you are, but I love you. I like come out, like come on, like to the surface. I will stop kind of pushing down the stuff. I'm gonna let it come to the surface and I'll accept you, whoever you are. And it was in that moment that like the littlest inklings started coming up of like, oh, okay, well, if that's true, and is that okay? Yeah, it's okay, right? So I went through this whole process with myself. It took a while. And but when I fully turned toward myself and said, Melanie, I love you. Whoever you are is okay. We're gonna be fine. I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. I'm my same person, right? Like, I'm really not going anywhere. But like, this is okay. Like, who are we? You know, let's discover. And for me, that was when I gave myself permission to be my best self, to be my full self. That's when I discovered who I was. And so once I came out to the world, I don't know if you remember when I came out, but it was just like, yeah, girl, I'm gay. I'm moving on. Like, we're doing something else. So it's like,
if you like made an announcement, but I just know when I went to Oakland or when I went to San Francisco, you were different. I was like, but I didn't care and I didn't question. I just was speaking it. I'm like, well, I don't know. She dresses different, but I would like to borrow an outfit. But, you know, so but it wasn't like I didn't feel like, I didn't really care, honestly, like as far as making a big deal out of it. I was just like, okay, well, that, you know. Yeah. Just you and
you. So for me,
right? Was that just, did you make an announcement or something? I don't remember.
To announce what?
You didn't announce it? No, like before that, like, this is what I am. I just know that you brought her and then that was it.
Oh yeah. Okay. So you didn't meet my other girlfriend. Yeah. So yeah.
Oh, I mean, no, I didn't. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I think she came on one time and it was like, yeah, no, go.
Oh, okay.
Somebody likes you. My mom was like, who is this?
Right.
You can be whoever you are, but who is this? So, but what I was going to say is that, yeah, for me, it was like the hardest part was coming out to myself. And then once that happened, I was like, okay, cool. Well, then people gonna think about me what they want to think about me. I'm not worried about my mom. My mom is fine. My mom is cool. She's happy to see me happy. And frankly, happy to see me not run around with these little raggedy ragtag men all over the place. Like, she was like, okay, fine. So, you know, for me, it really was like, that was so to your question of like discovering my best self, it was really having the bravery to, and the love, and just being willing to discover who I was, because so much of this society tells people who are socialized and raised as Black women in particular, Black people specifically, and Black women in particular, that we aren't good enough, that you have to be some other thing. Who you are doesn't matter. You should be that, right? And so it's like, once I was able to like understand, okay, I'm not actually feeling fulfilled here. Let me slow down and like kind of go inside and like really be like, what am I pushing something down? Oh, I am pushing something down. What am I pushing down? What if I stop pushing it down? What's going to come up? And it's like, oh, this is okay. It's okay to be this.
Of
Yeah.
That's the fear of not giving
Yeah.
yourself permission, which I love that you said, giving yourself permission before anybody else can say anything, but the fear of what is going to come up. Because even for myself,
I know.
I'm like, if I'm too personal or tell people too much, what's going to come up? Like, it's
totally.
Yeah.
And and here's the thing, right? It's like, if you have, like what I was saying earlier, if you've got your circle, if you've got your tribe, then you don't have to, like, you are with you first and then you're with other people. But if you have people that you trust and that you love and who love you, right, then they can actually hold, they can hold you as you're going through this process of self-discovery. Like so a funny story about me and Julia, Julia's my wife, listeners, if you don't know. And one of the first stories I like still crack up about, is I have a really good friend who introduced me actually to Julia. And this was years ago, it was years before we got together actually. And this friend was like I was like coming out to everybody, like my friend, I had like a whole list. Okay, I'm gonna come out to this person and that person, let them know so that they know, and so we can move on, right? Yeah. People I worked with and people that were my friends. And we had to go on this like business trip to Miami. So I was like, okay, well, this person, I'm gonna tell her after we get back from Miami, because we're on a work trip. I don't want no big deal. So on that work trip to Miami, we met Julia. And Julia was like, Julia was out. She's like, oh, who's that? To our friend. And she's like, oh, that's Melanie, girl. She's hella straight. And Julia was like, oh, all right. Well, I don't mess with straight girls. So like, it's, cool, whatever. She seems cool. Right on, moving on. And then that meeting was over, that trip was over. And I came out to Marlene, my friend Marlene. And she was like, oh, Julia asked about you. But I said, don't worry about it, girl. She's hella straight. I was like, no. So for years later, Julia thought I was straight. And so anyway, I always like chuckle at that, because coming out is a process. People are constantly coming out. Like I'll meet people, they want like, oh, is she? And it's like, at some point they find out. And because I don't hide who I am, I like talk about the love of my life, who is a woman whose name is Julia, right? So it's like, no one's out here hiding, but unless you're in a relationship with people, you don't know them, they don't know you. And so why would you know anything meaningful about their lives?
Right.
Thank you for listening to Discover Your Best Self. Don't forget to subscribe and comment. Follow us on Instagram at Discover Your Best Self.